The stars were dying. Not from old age or cosmic collapse, but from war. 7 long years of war that had turned entire solar systems into graveyards of metal and ash. Admiral Keffer pressed his 4-fingered hand against the cold metal of the viewing window aboard the Coalition flagship. Outside, the debris of yesterday's battle drifted like snow in the darkness of space. His blue skin had grown pale over the years. The war had aged him beyond his natural lifespan. Where once his eyes held the bright confidence of a seasoned military commander, now they showed only the weight of endless defeat. The Coalition was losing badly. "Sir, another message from High Command," said Lieutenant Veltar, her voice barely above a whisper. She was young, barely past her first century, and the war had already taken most of her family. Her hands shook as she held the datapad. Keffer turned away from the window. "What do they want now?" "The Council is demanding explanations for the loss of the Rigel system. They want to know why we lost 43 ships in a single day." Keffer's mandibles clicked in frustration. The sound echoed in the quiet bridge. How could he explain what everyone already knew? The Vex were simply better at war than they were. The Coalition had 12 different species, each with their own strengths. The Zephyrians were masters of technology. The Krell were born warriors. The Altarians were skilled diplomats. Together they should have been unstoppable, but the Vex dominion was something else entirely. They were a species that had turned destruction into an art form. Every ship they built was designed for one purpose: to destroy everything in their path. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. "Tell High Command that we followed standard battle protocol," Keffer said finally. "The enemy had superior numbers and firepower. We extracted what forces we could." It was the same report he had filed dozens of times before. The Coalition's military doctrine was based on centuries of tradition. They fought with honor, protected civilian populations, and minimized casualties on both sides. These were the principles that had kept peace in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. The Vex did not care about principles. The bridge doors opened. With a soft hiss, General Thakmer entered, his heavy armor clanking with each step. The Krell commander stood nearly 8 feet tall, his thick gray skin covered in ritual scars from countless battles. Even among his warrior people, Thakmer was legendary for his combat skills. "Admiral," the general rumbled, "we need to talk." Keffer nodded to his crew. "Clear the bridge." "Lieutenant Veltar, you stay." When the other officers had left, Thakmer moved to the tactical display. The holographic map showed the current state of the war. Red markers indicated Vex-controlled systems. Blue showed Coalition territory. There was much more red than blue. "We lost another colony world yesterday," Thakmer said. "The Vex orbital. Bombardment of Kepler 442 be lasted for 6 hours. 18 million civilians." Veltar made a soft sound of grief. Kepler 442b had been her homeworld. "The Vex strategy is simple," Thakmer continued. "They destroy everything. Military bases, civilian cities, agricultural centers, even the wildlife. They turn entire planets into dead rocks, then move on to the next target." Keffer studied the map. "What are our options?" "We could try the Gamma Protocol," Thakmer suggested. "Full military mobilization. Draft every able-bodied citizen from all Coalition worlds. Build a fleet large enough to match their numbers." "That would take 5 years," Keffer replied. "Maybe 10? "How many worlds will the Vex destroy while we prepare?" "Too many," Thakmer admitted. The tactical display changed, showing the latest intelligence reports. The Vex had established a massive staging area in the Vega system. 3,000 ships, all pointed toward the Coalition's core worlds. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. "They are planning something big," Veltar said. "Quietly, this is not a normal attack formation." Keffer zoomed in on the enemy fleet. The Vex ships were ugly things, built for function rather than beauty. They looked like giant insects made of black metal, bristling with weapons and armor. Each ship was twice the size of a Coalition vessel and carried 10 times the firepower. How long do we have? He asked. Intelligence estimates they will move within the next solar cycle, Fakemore replied. Their target appears to be the Centauri system. The Centauri system was home to over 40 billion Coalition citizens. It was also the location of the Coalition's primary military academy, their largest shipyard, and the seat of government. If the Vex took Centauri, the war would be over. We need help, Kethver said. New allies, new weapons, new strategies. Everything we have tried has failed? The Council has been debating that very question, said a new voice. Counselor Yelanara of the Altarians entered the bridge. She was small compared to the other species, barely 5 feet tall, with silver skin and large dark eyes. But her intelligence was legendary throughout the galaxy. What have they decided? Kethver asked. Nothing yet, Yelanara replied, but there is one possibility we have not fully explored. She activated a new display on the tactical screen. A small solar system appeared, showing a yellow star with several planets. The third planet was highlighted in green. The humans, she said quietly. Fakemore snorted. The primitives? They have been spacefaring for barely 3 years. What could they possibly offer? Perhaps more than we think, Yelanara replied. I have been studying their history. This species has been at war with itself for most of its existence. They have fought thousands of conflicts, large and small. They have developed strategies and tactics that no other species has ever conceived. She pulled up another display, showing human military conflicts throughout their history. Look at their battle records. Time after time, smaller human forces have defeated larger enemies through superior tactics and unconventional thinking. Kethver studied the data. They fight dirty. They fight to win, Yelanara corrected. They do not follow the traditional rules of warfare. They use deception, surprise attacks, and psychological warfare. They target enemy weaknesses rather than engaging in direct confrontation. That is not how civilized species conduct military operations, Fakemore protested. No, Yelanara agreed. But we are not fighting a civilized enemy. The Vex have already abandoned all rules of warfare. Perhaps it is time we learned from a species that never had such rules to begin with. The bridge fell silent as the 3 officers considered the implications. First contact with humanity had been peaceful but limited. The Coalition had classified them as a developing species, worthy of observation but not interaction. They had technology that was primitive by galactic standards. No energy weapons, no defensive shields, no artificial gravity. Their fastest ships could barely achieve light speed, but they had something else. Something that made the Coalition's xenobiologists nervous. Human aggression levels were off the charts compared to other species. They seemed to enjoy conflict in a way that other races found disturbing. What would we offer them? Kethver asked. Full membership in the Coalition, Yelanara replied. Access to our technology, our trade networks, our knowledge. In exchange, they would contribute their military expertise to our cause. And if they refuse? Then we face the Vex alone, Yelanara said, and we lose. Kethver looked at the tactical display again. The red markers seemed to pulse like infected wounds on the star chart. The Coalition had tried everything. Traditional tactics, superior technology, diplomatic solutions. Nothing had worked against the Vex war machine. Send the message, he said finally. Contact the human government. Tell them we need their help. What? If they are not interested in joining a galactic war? Veltar asked. Kethver smiled grimly. From what I have read about humans, war is the one thing they are very good at. The question is not whether they will fight. The question is whether they will fight for us. The message was sent that very day. A formal request for military alliance, transmitted across the galaxy to a small blue world that most species considered insignificant. The Coalition had no idea that this single message would change the course of galactic history. The humans were about to join the war. And when they did, everything would change. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the message arrived. The coffee was terrible, like everything else aboard the EDF Horizon, but it was hot and it had caffeine. That was enough for a man who had spent the last 6 months patrolling the outer edge of human space, looking for signs of alien activity. The communication alert chimed 3 times. Priority message. Morrison set down his mug and walked to the bridge. His crew was already at their stations, faces serious. Lieutenant Carlos Torres looked up from the communications console. Captain, we are receiving a transmission on the diplomatic frequency. It is using coalition protocols. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. The coalition had made contact with Earth 3 years ago, but communication had been limited. A few scientific exchanges, some cultural information, nothing more. Earth was considered too primitive to be of real interest to the galactic community. Put it through, Morrison ordered. The message appeared on the main screen. It was imperfect. English, translated by coalition computers. Morrison read it twice, then read it again. The words did not change. Holy hell, he whispered. Sir? Torres asked. Set course for Earth, maximum speed. Priority Alpha clearance. Sir, that will use most of our fuel reserves. Do it, Morrison snapped, and send a message ahead. Tell them we have a situation. The EDF Horizon was not a fast ship. It was one of only 12 vessels in the Earth Defense Force that could travel faster than light. The technology was still new, still experimental, but it got them home in 18 hours instead of the usual 3 days. Earth looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. Morrison had seen it 1,000 times, but it never got old. Now, looking at his homeworld, he wondered if it would still be there in a year. The coalition message was simple. They were losing a war. They needed help. They were offering humanity full membership in their galactic community in exchange for military assistance. It sounded like a good deal. It sounded too good to be true. President Helen Carter was waiting for them at the Global Defense Center in Colorado. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been a general before she became president, and she still carried herself like a soldier. Captain Morrison, she said as he entered the briefing room. I understand you have something interesting to show us. The room was full of important people. Admiral Ross Patterson, head of the Earth Defense Force, Secretary of Defense Maria Santos, General Kate Walsh from the Marines, Dr. Alan Cooper, the top expert on alien life. A dozen other officials and military leaders. Morrison activated the holographic display. The coalition message appeared, along with star charts showing the current state of the galactic war. Red dots for enemy territory. Blue dots for coalition. Space. There was a lot more red than blue. The coalition is asking us to join a war, Morrison said. They are fighting an enemy called the Vex Dominion. The war has been going on for 7 years. The coalition is losing. General Walsh leaned forward. What makes them think we can help? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. That is the interesting part, Morrison replied. He pulled up another display showing human military history. They have been studying us. They think our approach to warfare is unique. Dr. Cooper cleared his throat. I have been in contact with coalition scientists for the past 2 years. They find human psychology fascinating, particularly our approach to conflict resolution. What does that mean? President Carter asked. It means they think we are really good at fighting, Patterson said bluntly. They have read our history, every war we have ever fought. They are impressed by our tactics. The room fell silent. Everyone knew human history was full of war. Wars between nations, wars between tribes, wars between ideas. Humanity had been fighting itself for thousands of years. What are they offering? Santos asked. Morrison brought up the coalition's proposal. Full membership in the Galactic Coalition. Access to their technology, their trade networks, their knowledge. They are offering to upgrade our entire civilization. And in exchange, they want our military expertise. They want us to help them fight the Vex. President Carter studied the display. Tell me about this enemy. What are we up against? Morrison pulled up the intelligence files the coalition had provided. Images of Vex ships filled the screen. They were huge, black, and covered in weapons. They look like something from a nightmare. The Vex are a species that has turned war into a science, Morrison explained. Every aspect of their society is dedicated to military conquest. They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They destroy everything in their path. How many ships do they have? Walsh asked. Current estimates put their fleet at over 10,000 vessels. The coalition has maybe 3,000 ships left. The numbers were sobering. Even with human help, the coalition was badly outnumbered. What does their intelligence say about Vex tactics? Patterson asked. Morrison brought up the battle reports. The Vex use overwhelming force. They gather large fleets and attack with massive firepower. They have been using the same strategy for 7 years, and it has worked every time. Dr. Cooper was studying the Vex ship designs. These vessels are built for maximum destruction, but look at their design. They are not very maneuverable. They rely on heavy armor and big guns. Classic hammer approach, Walsh observed. Hit hard, hit fast, overwhelm the enemy with superior firepower. It has been working, Santos pointed out. Against the coalition, Patterson said. The coalition fights by the rules. They try to minimize casualties. They protect civilian populations. They fight with honor. President Carter was quiet for a long moment. And we do not fight with honor? We fight to win, Patterson replied. We use whatever tactics work. We adapt to the enemy instead of expecting the enemy to adapt to us. The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humanity was not ready for a galactic war. Others worried about the moral implications of joining a conflict they did not fully understand. A few questioned whether the coalition could be trusted. But in the end, the decision was obvious. The coalition was offering humanity everything they had dreamed of: access to advanced technology, membership in a galactic community, the chance to explore the stars. All they had to do was help fight a war. What are the risks? President Carter asked. If we lose, Earth could be destroyed, Morrison said honestly. The Vex do not leave survivors. And if we win, we become a major power in the galaxy. We get technology that could solve every problem on Earth: energy, medicine, transportation, communication, everything. President Carter looked around the room. Are we ready for this? We are as ready as we will ever be, Patterson said. Our military is small but professional. Our technology is primitive but effective. And we have something the coalition does. Not have. What is that? We know how to fight dirty. The vote was unanimous. Earth would join the coalition. Humanity would go to war against an enemy they had never seen, in a conflict they barely understood, for stakes they could hardly imagine. Within hours, the response was sent to the coalition. Earth accepted their offer. Human military advisors would be sent to study the enemy and develop new strategies. The Earth Defense Force would be upgraded with coalition technology, and humanity would prove whether their reputation as warriors was deserved. President Carter addressed the world that night. She explained the situation in simple terms. Earth had been invited to join a galactic community. The price was helping to fight a war. The alternative was remaining isolated while the galaxy burned around them. We go to the stars not as conquerors but as protectors, she said. We bring our own gifts to this fight. Our creativity, our determination, and our refusal to accept defeat. The first transport ships arrived within days. Coalition engineers worked around the clock to upgrade human vessels with alien technology. Human officers studied coalition battle tactics and enemy intelligence. Earth prepared for its first interstellar war. Nobody knew it yet, but the galaxy was about to change forever. Humanity was joining the fight, and they were bringing their own ideas about how wars should be fought. Colonel Ben Rodriguez had never seen anything like the Coalition Tactical Center. The room was massive, filled with holographic displays that showed star systems, fleet movements, and battle statistics. Alien officers moved between the displays, their different species creating a strange mix of colors and shapes. Some had blue skin, others had gray armor, and a few looked almost human except for their silver faces and large black eyes. Rodriguez was not easily impressed. He had spent 20 years in the military, fighting in conflicts across Earth. He had seen advanced technology before. But this was different. This was the command center for an entire galaxy's military forces. Colonel Rodriguez, Admiral Kethver, approached him. The alien was tall and thin, with blue skin and 4 arms. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. I hope you and your team are ready to begin," Rodriguez nodded. "We are ready, Admiral. My people have been studying your reports during the trip. Here, and what do you think?" Rodriguez chose his words carefully. "We think there is room for improvement." Behind him, his team was already setting up their equipment. Lieutenant Amy Parker was a former intelligence analyst who had spent 5 years studying enemy tactics in Earth's conflicts. Major Dan Scott was a Marine who had fought in urban warfare and knew how to adapt to difficult situations. Commander Lisa Grant had been a Navy SEAL, trained in special operations and unconventional warfare. "The Coalition has given us complete access to 7 years of battle data," Rodriguez told his team. "Everything they have on the Vex, ship designs, battle formations, tactical patterns. I want to know everything about this enemy." Parker was already deep in the data, her eyes scanning through thousands of reports. "Colonel, this is incredible. The Vex have fought over 300 major battles. Every single engagement is documented." "What do you see?" Rodriguez asked. "Patterns," Parker said. "The Vex fight the same way every time. They gather their fleet into a massive formation. They approach the target directly. They use overwhelming firepower to destroy everything in their path. They never change tactics." Scott was studying the Vex ship designs. "These things are built like tanks. Heavy armor, big guns, lots of firepower, but look at their maneuvering systems. They are slow and clumsy." Grant was examining the battle recordings. "The Coalition fights like they are dancing. Beautiful formations. Elegant maneuvers, minimal casualties. It is very civilized." "And the Vex?" Rodriguez asked. "The Vex fight like they are crushing insects," Grant replied. "No finesse, no strategy. Just raw power applied until the enemy is dead." Rodriguez pulled up a tactical display showing the most recent battle. The Coalition fleet had been arranged in a defensive formation, protecting a civilian evacuation convoy. The Vex had approached in a massive wedge formation, their ships tightly packed together. The battle had lasted 4 hours and ended with the Coalition's retreat. "What do you see wrong with this picture?" Rodriguez asked his team. Parker studied the display. "The Coalition is fighting defensively. They are trying to protect the convoy while fighting off the attackers. That limits their options. The Vex formation is too tight," Scott added. "If something happened to the lead ships, the whole formation would be disrupted." Grant was focusing on the ship movements. "The Coalition ships are staying at maximum weapons range. They never get close. They are fighting a long-range battle against an enemy that is built for close combat." Rodriguez nodded. "What else?" "The Vex ships are huge," Parker said. "They have blind spots, areas where their weapons cannot target effectively. The Coalition never tries to exploit those weaknesses." "And look at this," Scott said, pointing to the display. "The Vex never split their forces. They always attack with their entire fleet. That means they cannot respond to multiple threats at the same time." Rodriguez was beginning to understand why the Coalition had asked for human help. The aliens were fighting a civilized war against an enemy that did not follow civilized rules. They were trying to minimize casualties while the Vex were trying to maximize destruction. "Colonel," Admiral Kethver approached their workstation. "Have you found anything useful?" Rodriguez looked at the alien commander. "Admiral, can I ask you something? Why do you fight the way you do?" Kethver seemed confused by the question. "We follow standard military doctrine. We protect civilian populations. We minimize casualties on both sides. We fight with honor, even when the enemy does not." "Especially then," Kethver replied. "We are not barbarians. We are civilized beings." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Admiral, what if I told you that your civilized approach is why you are losing this war?" The bridge fell silent. Several alien officers turned to listen to the conversation. The Vex are not civilized, Rodriguez continued. They do not care about honor or minimizing casualties. They care about winning, and they are very good at it. What are you suggesting? Kethver asked. I am suggesting that you cannot fight a barbarian enemy with civilized tactics, Rodriguez said. You have to adapt. You have to think like they think. You have to fight like they fight. We will not become monsters, Kethver said firmly. I am not asking you to become monsters, Rodriguez replied. I am asking you to become smarter. The Vex have one advantage. They have superior numbers and firepower. But they have many weaknesses. They are predictable. They are inflexible. They cannot adapt to new situations. Rodriguez turned to the tactical display. Look at this battle again. The Coalition had 400 ships. The Vex had 1,000. But the Coalition only used their ships as a single formation. What if they had split into smaller groups? What if they had attacked from multiple directions? The Vex would have destroyed the smaller groups one by one, Kethver said. Maybe, Rodriguez agreed. Or maybe the Vex would have been confused. They have never faced multiple simultaneous attacks. Their tactical programming might not know how to respond. Parker was pulling up more battle data. Colonel, look at this. In every engagement, the Vex take at least 30 minutes to form their battle line. They always arrange their ships in the same pattern. If someone attacked during that formation period, the Vex would be vulnerable, Scott finished. Their ships would be out of position, unable to provide mutual support. Grant was studying the Vex ship designs more carefully. These big ships have another weakness. They are built for space combat. But what if the battle took place near a planet? Or in an asteroid field? They would have trouble maneuvering in tight spaces. Rodriguez was getting excited. What if we used their size against them? Small, fast ships could get inside their formation. The big Vex ships would not be able to target them without risking damage to their own forces. That is suicide, Kethver protested. Small ships cannot survive against those weapons. They can if they are too close to be targeted, Rodriguez replied. Human pilots call it knife fighting. You get so close to the enemy that their advantages become disadvantages. Over the next 3 days, the human team worked around the clock. They analyzed every battle, every ship design, every tactical decision. They found patterns that the Coalition had missed. They identified weaknesses that had been overlooked. The Vex were not invincible. They were just very good at fighting enemies who followed predictable patterns. But they had never faced an enemy that fought like humans. We need to change everything, Rodriguez told Admiral Kethver. Formation flying, engagement ranges, tactical doctrine, everything. This is very dangerous, Kethver warned. If your ideas are wrong, we could lose our entire fleet. Admiral, Rodriguez said quietly, if we do nothing, you are going to lose anyway. The Vex are planning something big. Our intelligence says they are gathering the largest fleet in galactic history. When they move, it will be to end this war. Once and for all, the Admiral studied the tactical displays. The red markers showing Vex territory had grown larger every day. Soon, they would reach the Coalition's core worlds. What do you need? Kethver asked finally. Complete tactical authority, Rodriguez replied. My team plans the next battle. We choose the location, the timing, and the strategy. The Coalition provides the ships and follows our orders. That is unprecedented, Kethver said. So is losing a galactic war, Rodriguez replied. The decision was made. For the first time in Coalition history, aliens would follow human military doctrine. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when civilized beings learned to fight like barbarians. The battle began at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the EDF Liberty, watching the massive Vex fleet approach on his screens. 3,000 enemy ships, arranged in their usual wedge formation, moving toward what they thought was a desperate coalition. Attack. Morrison had volunteered to lead the first phase of the battle. His ship was small compared to the Coalition vessels and tiny compared to the Vex dreadnoughts. But it was fast, and it was piloted by humans who understood what they were about to do. "All stations, this is Morrison," he said into his communicator. "Remember what we practiced? We are not here to fight fair. We are here to win." The Liberty was equipped with Coalition technology, but it still looked like a human ship. Angular and practical, built for function rather than beauty. The aliens had been surprised by human ship design. Most species built their vessels to look impressive. Humans built them to work. "Captain, we are receiving targeting locks from the enemy fleet," reported Lieutenant Carlos Torres. "They think we are making a suicide run," Morrison smiled. "Let them think that. All human vessels, execute pattern Alpha. Time to show these aliens how Earth fights." The Liberty dove straight into the heart of the Vex formation. Behind it, 49 other human ships followed the same path. To the Vex it looked like madness. 50 small ships attacking 3,000 massive warships. It should have been a massacre, but the humans were not planning to fight a traditional battle. As soon as the Liberty entered the Vex formation, Morrison gave the order. "Break and scatter. Execute Wolfpack protocol." The human ships split apart like a school of fish. Each ship took a different path through the enemy formation. They were too small and too fast for the massive Vex weapons to track effectively. The big alien ships found themselves firing at targets that were no longer there. Lieutenant Commander Steve Hayes was piloting one of the smaller human fighters. His ship was barely the size of a Vex shuttle, but it was armed with Coalition energy weapons and piloted by someone who had learned to fly in Earth's atmosphere. "This is Hayes," he reported over the communication channel. "Beginning micro-assault." "Pattern. These big boys really do not like it when you get personal." Hayes dove his fighter underneath a Vex dreadnought, so close that he could see the individual hull plates. His weapons targeted the weak points that human engineers had identified. Sensor arrays, weapon mounts, engine exhausts? Not enough to destroy the ship, but enough to blind and cripple it. The Vex had never faced this kind of attack. Their tactical computers were programmed for large-scale fleet battles, not individual dogfights. They tried to target the human ships, but their formations began to break apart as ships collided, trying to track the small, fast targets. "Phase 1 complete," Morrison reported to Admiral Kethver, who was watching the battle from the Coalition command ship. "Enemy formation is disrupted, beginning Phase 2. This was the moment the Coalition forces had been waiting for. For 7 years, they had watched their beautiful, organized fleets get destroyed by Vex's overwhelming firepower. Now, for the first time, the Vex were confused and disorganized. The Coalition ships moved in like wolves attacking a scattered herd. Instead of maintaining their traditional formations, they split into small groups. Each group surrounded an isolated Vex ship and destroyed it with concentrated fire. Commander Thakmer of the Krell was leading one of these attack groups. His warrior instincts had been frustrated by years of defensive fighting. Now, finally, he could hunt. "Target the damaged vessels first," he ordered his squadron. "The humans have blinded them. Finish them." The Krell ships moved with deadly precision. They had been trained for individual combat since childhood, but Coalition doctrine had never allowed them to use those skills. Human tactics had freed them to fight the way they were born to fight. The Vex tried to reform their battle line, but the human ships would not let them. Every time a group of Vex ships began to organize, human fighters would dive in and break them apart. It was like trying to build a house while someone threw rocks at the workers. "Sir, the enemy is requesting reinforcements," reported Lieutenant Veltar from the Coalition command ship. Admiral Kethver watched the battle display with amazement. The Vex had never requested reinforcements before. They had always been confident that their initial force was sufficient. "How many ships are they calling for?" he asked. "Another 1,000 vessels, sir." "They are pulling ships from 3 different systems." Kethver turned to Colonel Rodriguez, who was coordinating the human tactics. "Colonel, they are bringing more ships." Rodriguez did not look concerned. "Good. That is exactly what we wanted them to do. I do not understand." "Admiral, the Vex have been fighting the same way for 7 years. Big formations, overwhelming force, direct assault. They have never had to adapt to a new situation. When their standard tactics do not work, they do not know what to do except use more force. Rodriguez pointed to the tactical display. Look at what they are doing. They are pulling ships from defensive positions to reinforce this attack. That means other systems are now vulnerable. You planned for this? We hoped for it, Rodriguez replied. The Vex cannot think strategically. They can only think tactically. They see a problem. They throw more ships at it. They do not consider the larger implications. The reinforcement fleet arrived 90 minutes into the battle. Another 1,000 Vex ships rushing to help their allies. But instead of turning the tide, they made the situation worse. The new ships tried to form up with the existing fleet, but the battle zone was chaos. Human fighters were everywhere, coalition ships were attacking from all directions, and the original Vex formation had completely collapsed. All coalition vessels, this is Admiral Patterson, came a voice over the communication channel. Admiral. Ross Patterson was commanding the human fleet from the EDF horizon. Execute Phase 3. Repeat. Execute Phase 3. Phase 3 was the secret weapon. During the confusion of the battle, human ships had been dropping small devices throughout the combat zone. They looked like debris, floating harmlessly in space. The Vex had ignored them completely. They were electromagnetic pulse mines. All human vessels clear the target zone, Patterson ordered. Detonation in 30 seconds. The human ships pulled back to safe distance. The coalition forces followed, leaving the Vex fleet alone in the middle of the combat zone. 10 seconds, Patterson announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, execute. The mines detonated simultaneously. There was no visible explosion, no flash of light, but every Vex ship in the target zone suddenly went dark. Their advanced computer systems, their targeting sensors, their navigation equipment, all of it was disabled by the electromagnetic pulse. 4,000 Vex ships, the largest fleet in galactic history, were suddenly blind and helpless. All vessels. Commence final assault, Admiral Keffer ordered. What followed was not really a battle. It was target practice. The disabled Vex ships could not maneuver, could not target their weapons, could not even communicate with each other. The coalition forces moved in and systematically destroyed them. Captain Morrison watched from the Liberty as the massive Vex dreadnoughts exploded one by one. Each ship had been a terror of the galaxy, unstoppable and invincible. Now they were just floating metal, waiting to be destroyed. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Vex fleet, Torres reported. It is on all frequencies. Put it through. The message was simple and in broken galactic common language. We surrender. We request immediate ceasefire. We surrender. Morrison looked at his watch. The battle had lasted exactly 5 hours and 12 minutes. A war that had raged for 7 years was over. All vessels, cease fire, Admiral Keffer ordered. The enemy has surrendered. In the silence that followed, Morrison realized that everything had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had proven that they belonged among the stars, and they had done it in the most human way possible. They had won a war that everyone said was impossible to win. The debris field stretched for millions of kilometers. Twisted metal and broken ships floated in the darkness of space like a graveyard of giants. Admiral Keffer stood in the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching the cleanup crews work. It was hard to believe that just 6 months ago, this had been the site of the largest space battle in galactic history. Beside him, Colonel Ben Rodriguez sipped coffee from a thermos. The human had become something of a legend throughout Coalition space, the man who had ended a 7-year war in 5 hours. But Rodriguez did not act like a legend. He acted like a tired soldier who wanted to go home. Your people fight like nothing we have ever seen, Keffer said quietly. The Coalition studied warfare for thousands of years. We developed rules, traditions, honor codes. But we never developed your creativity, Rodriguez nodded. We had to learn creativity. Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. Big countries against small countries. Rich armies against poor armies. We learned that the biggest force does not always win. Sometimes you win by being smarter. Sometimes you win by being faster. Sometimes you win by being crazy enough to try something nobody expects. The cleanup was almost finished. The disabled Vex ships had been towed to Coalition shipyards. Some would be scrapped for materials. Others would be studied to understand Vex technology. A few would be converted into research vessels or cargo. Haulers. The Vex themselves were a bigger problem. Their entire society had been built around military conquest. When their fleet surrendered, their government collapsed. Billions of Vex civilians were left without leadership, without purpose, without hope. What will happen to them? Rodriguez asked. The Coalition Council is debating that question, Kethver replied. Some want to treat them as criminals. Others want to help them rebuild their society. It is a difficult decision. What do you think? Kethver was quiet for a moment. I think they are not evil. They are just different. They were raised to believe that conquest was the only way to survive. Now they must learn new ways. The Coalition had established refugee camps on several Vex worlds. Human aid workers were among the first volunteers to help. They brought food, medicine, and something the Vex had never experienced before, mercy from their enemies. Captain Jake Morrison had been promoted to admiral after the battle. He now commanded the Human Tactical Division, a new branch of Coalition, forces dedicated to developing unconventional strategies. His headquarters was on Luna, Earth's moon, where human and alien officers worked together to revolutionize galactic military doctrine. The key is adaptability, Morrison explained to a class of Coalition officers. The Vex failed because they could not adapt to new situations. They had one plan, and when that plan failed, they had no backup options. The classroom was filled with representatives from all 12 Coalition species. Zephyrians with their blue skin and multiple arms, Krell warriors in their ceremonial armor, Altarians with their silver faces and large dark eyes. They were all learning human military tactics. Human warfare is based on the idea that no plan survives contact with the enemy, Morrison continued. So we train our people to think independently, to adapt quickly, and to find solutions when the original strategy fails. Lieutenant Amy Parker had been promoted to Intelligence Director for the Coalition. Her analytical methods had been adopted throughout the galactic intelligence community. She was currently working on a project to predict and prevent future conflicts before they escalated into wars. The warning signs were always there, she explained to Admiral Kethver during one of their regular briefings. The Vex had been expanding aggressively for decades. They had conquered smaller species, absorbed their territory, and built up their military. But nobody thought they would attack the Coalition directly. Why not? Because it seemed impossible. The Coalition was too big, too advanced, too well defended. But the Vex did not think like other species. They saw the Coalition's size as a challenge, not a deterrent. Parker's new early warning system monitored hundreds of factors across the galaxy: trade disputes, resource shortages, political instability, military buildups. By analyzing patterns and trends, the system could identify potential conflicts years before they became violent. Major Don Scott had been assigned to train Coalition ground forces. His specialty was urban combat and irregular warfare. Most Coalition species had never fought on planetary surfaces. Their wars had always been conducted in space, with clean formations and clear rules of engagement. Ground combat is different, Scott explained to a group of Krell warriors. You cannot see the entire battlefield. You cannot control all the variables. You have to trust your instincts and adapt to changing situations. The Krell were natural warriors, but they had been trained for honorable single combat. Scott was, teaching them how to fight as a team, how to use cover and concealment, how to outthink an enemy instead of simply overpowering them. Commander Lisa Grant had established the Coalition's first Special Operations Unit. Her team included volunteers from every Coalition species, trained in sabotage, reconnaissance, and unconventional warfare. They were the Coalition's answer to threats that could not be handled by traditional military forces. Most conflicts can be prevented with the right intervention at the right time, Grant explained to her team. Sometimes that means diplomatic pressure. Sometimes it means economic sanctions. And sometimes it means a small team doing something very dangerous in the dark. The integration of human tactics into coalition doctrine proceeded rapidly. Within a year, every coalition military academy required courses in human strategic thinking. The phrase, "fighting like a human," entered common galactic language, meaning to use unconventional tactics and creative problem-solving, but the most important changes were not military. The war had taught the coalition that their greatest strength was not their technology or their fleets. It was their diversity. Different species brought different perspectives, different solutions to the same problems. President Helen Carter visited coalition headquarters 1 year after the battle. She met with the Council of Species, the governing body that made decisions for the entire coalition. Her speech was broadcast throughout the galaxy. "We joined this war not as conquerors, but as partners," she said. "We brought our own gifts to the galaxy, our adaptability, our creativity, and our refusal to accept that any problem is unsolvable. But we also learned from you. We learned about cooperation, about building something greater than any single species could achieve alone." The Vex Dominion was slowly being transformed. Coalition advisors worked with Vex leaders to establish new governments, new economic systems, new ways of thinking about their place in the galaxy. It was a difficult process, complicated by centuries of military tradition and cultural isolation. Some Vex adapted quickly to their new reality. They became traders, scientists, artists, even diplomats. Others struggled with the concept of peaceful coexistence. But gradually, step by step, they were building a new society. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 7 years became known as the 5-Hour War in human history books. It marked humanity's emergence as a major galactic power and established the principle that the newest voice in the room sometimes had the best solution. Trade between Earth and coalition worlds flourished. Human technology, primitive by galactic standards, found unexpected applications when combined with alien science. Human music, literature, and art became popular throughout the galaxy, and human military advisors were in high demand wherever. Conflicts threatened to develop, but perhaps the most important legacy of the war was philosophical. The coalition had learned that strength came not from overwhelming force, but from the ability to think differently, to adapt quickly, and to never give up hope. Admiral Kethver, now in charge of coalition strategic planning, kept a small human flag on his desk. It reminded him of the lesson that had saved the galaxy. Sometimes, the solution to an impossible problem comes from the most unexpected source. The galaxy was at peace, and for the first time in history that peace felt permanent.